This video is not sponsored by Chick-fil-A, or any food service for that matter, but boy howdy, it sure would be nice if it was. Winter's getting close. I need food. You're a squirrel, they don't hibernate. Like and subscribe. Hello and welcome back to A Squirrel Plays. Today we're going to be talking about making an NPC bartender, which may sound oddly specific, but let me explain how the squirrel brain got here. When you're writing a book, you have control over how people respond to things within the story. If you need to get some exposition done, you can have characters ask the questions that you want. You can make them be interested in the things you want them to be interested in and inquire further. Ultimately, you, the author, do have total control over the situation at hand. But in a TTRPG, it is a two-part system. The GM can put as much as they want into the world, such as the bartender we'll be looking at, but it is up to the players to act on it. And that's why we're going to be building a bartender. We're going to see how we can build one character in different ways to get different reactions out of the players in order to guide a story where we need it to go without forcing it. And we'll be looking at 4 different reactions, or emotions, if you will. Part 1 will be the Jolly Bartender, a character that brings us joy and happiness, one that we are delighted to see. Part 2 will be the Grinch of a bartender, one that makes us angry, one we want to avoid. Part 3 will be the Suspicious Bartender, one that we don't trust and suspect is up to no good. And lastly, Part 4 will be the Curious Bartender, one we are interested in learning more about for no particular reason other than we find them interesting. Now, as always, squirrel disclaimer, and I think I've gotten this down to 3 steps. 1, I'm not your dad, you don't have to listen to me and can do whatever the heck you want. 2, calm down, you're watching free content on YouTube. 3, have fun. Look at that. Easy as pie. Get up off of that thing and dance to you better. All right, first off, we need to set ourselves a scene, and if we're talking about TTRPGs, then what better scene to use than a tavern? Because that's where all good adventures start, right? I'm going to lean into the fantasy setting because that's what I work with the most, but obviously the same logic applies regardless of your setting. And we're going to be focusing on the bartender himself, and that's it. I will note, though, that you absolutely can use the tavern itself as a tool for showing things about the bartender. It's his bar, after all, so naturally it would be an extension of him. I should do another video on using environments to show things about a character, but for this video we will focus on only the character. And this bartender in particular is going to be one that brings the party joy. One that makes them feel at home, someone they can trust and are happy to see. And I can tell you right now, without designing a single thing on this guy, that one of the easiest ways you can make players happy to see a character is to have that character give them something for free every time they see them. Doesn't have to be anything big, it might just be a free drink in this case. I believe this is what the cool kids call Pavloving someone. You condition them to associate this character with good things. If this is a character that they see repeatedly, that is. But hey, first impressions are everything, right? And we actually talked about that in another video on how to introduce characters, but today we're actually going to put that into some practice. So allow me to flex my art skills. On the board here, we have a dude, just a plain old dude, no descriptors. Basically, the GM just said, there's a bartender over there. And then it's up to you, the player, or the reader, to determine what this guy actually looks like. But we're trying to make the players like this guy, so what can we give him? How about a big, bushy white beard, and not just because that's the only color I have at the moment, and we'll leave him bald, nothing like a nice shiny dome to show you the way. I'm thinking he might be a little bit on the shorter side, but not a whole lot. And round, because round is smooth and happy, no jagged edges to cut yourself on. Now, while this is all good and fun, let's be only slightly more serious and consider how this circular individual carries himself. What's his tone of voice like? How does he gesture or move? That kind of thing. And I like the idea of him making large gestures with his arms, such as spreading them out wide and saying welcome when you walk in. He could also put both hands on his belly when he has a good laugh and, of course, tells you to come inside and immediately asks what you'd like to drink. When the players walk in, this dude would be like, "Vitreous, come in, have a seat. I'll get you samples of the booze so you know exactly what you want." Then the party makes their way over to the bar and takes him up on the offer, and this crazy old man continues on as he pours the drinks. It's always good to see an adventurer come through. You make the city a better place, and y'all are good for business. Never seen a good adventurer turn down a drink before. And he, like, shakes his whole head and beard when he makes that noise. Anyway, that's totally not just Santa Claus, but you get the idea. A friendly, silly, jolly sort that puts the players at ease and makes them feel welcome at the tavern. No reason not to trust him, right? Oh wait, that's part 3. Bad segue. What if we took the same individual, or at least his physical appearance, but we changed his demeanor into something else? He's still short, fat, round, bald, and has his bushy white beard. All that stays the same. But now we want the players to dislike this individual. Why? No idea, but that's what the imaginary GM wants to do, so who am I to disappoint? So this time, let's say he has a bit of a gruffier voice. Gruffier? Is that a word? Gruffer? More gruffy? We'll also say he's short with his words. He doesn't welcome you inside, he just says, "What do you want?" in a way that suggests he'd rather you not even be there. The opposite of Chick-fil-A customer service, in other words.
Need one more, though. I need one? Yeah. All right, come on, Chick-fil-A customer service, let's get it. 10 out of 10 service, baby, give it to him. Welcome. Tell him how to hoop. Hey, my pleasure.
And this continues on with all of his dialogue with the party. What do you want? We ain't got that. I hate adventurers. Don't start nothing in my bar. That kind of thing. Popeye's level of customer service. Man, I'm recording hungry again. Ladies and gentlemen, don't let the squirrel starve. Hit that like and subscribe button to get him some Chick-fil-A. He may go as far as to not even say anything when the party walks in and merely rolls his eyes at the sight of adventurers. Top that off with him crossing his arms a lot, glaring at you, or anybody really, and then ignoring most of what you say. Mix all that in a pot and what do you have? Well, with any luck, a very unlikable bartender. Now, obviously, you can go too far with making him unlikable, and your players may take a swing at him, but hey, if you want to start a brawl in the bar for some reason, such as causing a distraction, then that might be the way to go. Point is, with a personality as smooth as 32 grit sandpaper, you're going to irritate the player characters, and hopefully just the characters and not the actual player. And notice, if you will, that we can do that with 0 changes to this man's physical appearance. Now, if the players are a bit more into the roleplay and say one of them is playing as a Khajiit, you could have the bartender wearing the pelt of one or the tail or something. Wait a minute. My bad, that's Elder Scrolls. What are the D&D ones called? Taxi cats or something? Tabaxi, that's it. The point still stands though. That could be seen as just a little bit offensive. And really the same for any kind of beast race. And on that note, in a similar vein, if the bartender is human, you could have him react with a good bit of racism towards whatever the players are playing as. Bonus points if one of them is human and gets special and preferred treatment. Who doesn't like a good dose of fantasy racism? But what if your bartender was the key to moving the plot along and was hiding some information? Maybe he knew those criminals that kidnapped the child you're looking for, or worse yet, had a hand in it. The party doesn't know that yet, but they're at the tavern looking for clues, speaking with random people to see what they can learn, doing the investigation thing, you know how it goes. And on that note, me and Adam over at the Inn of Planar Crossroads did recently do some episodes about detective and mystery games. And I came across an interesting article about the 3-clue rule, and there was a lot of interesting advice there about dropping hints for your players. Even if you're not running a game about detectives, it can still be useful, and I will hopefully include a link to that article as well as the chats that we had. But how do we make our bartender suspicious enough to draw the attention of the players, but not so sus that it's a dead giveaway? A little something something to tickle their interest. First off, we will scrap the appearance that we've been using. No more holly jolly boozy Santa. Also, I will say that of course there are a myriad of ways to go about this, but when I was working on it, my brain was stuck on the idea that this bartender isn't actually a bartender normally, it's just a ruse. So that's going to be my angle of approach on this. And because of that, we might say that his build is a bit more in shape, a bit fitter than the roly-poly we had earlier. Not much on its own, it could just be that he works out a lot. But if we give him a couple of scars on his hands and arms, and maybe even a nice cut on his face, that could indicate he's either extremely clumsy, or he gets into a little bit of mischief. Or perhaps he has a lot of riffraff in his bar. But what of his clothes? What if he lacked an apron? What if his shirt and pants lacked food and drink stains on them? That might be a little more suspicious for a bartender. Each of these on their own doesn't say a whole lot, but put them together, that guy's starting to look a little suspicious. Other things that would be way more obvious would be a lack of knowledge of beer and wine, or even not knowing where things are in what is supposedly his bar. A gang tattoo would be an easy one to spot, or perhaps a very specific high-end ring on his finger. What about a unique smell? A smell on the bartender that is nowhere to be found in the rest of the bar, but was at the scene of the crime. Perhaps a specific type of blade tucked under his shirt. The more observant party member may notice the bartender tapping his fingers in a specific pattern against the bar top. And again, the bartender doesn't have to be the bad guy here. He could be an innocent caught up in the middle of something, but you still want the party to be suspicious of him. He might be favoring a specific table of people, failing to fulfill the orders of other guests, often getting things wrong and bringing them the incorrect drinks and that sort of thing. He would come off as incredibly distracted, always glancing over at the same table, even while you're talking to him. Sus!
On the sheep in the front row. Okay, now to the right.
Now, what if you wanted your players to take an interest in an NPC and for no particular reason? You just wanted to sprinkle some life into the world. You could take some of the physical features from the suspicious bartender, such as the scars. That might coax the party into asking if he has to deal with a lot of troublemakers and get a conversation going. His answer might be, "Oh, these are older than every one of you. You'll be getting yours soon enough. Trust me, I used to be an adventurer just like you, and then I took an arrow to the knee." Obviously, not every party is going to respond the same. Some might not care at all after that, and some might inquire about the adventures he went on. If he's got any advice, what were some of the greatest treasures he's found, that kind of thing. You could also take the jolly bartender we had earlier, right up to the point he says, "Always good to see an adventurer become..." But let's change it ever so slightly. This time he says, "It's always good to see an adventurer come through. You do a much better job of keeping this place safe than those useless city guards. I just wish it hadn't taken me so long to realize that." And should the party be so inclined as to ask why, they might learn that the bartender once saw adventurers as a bane to society. Ruffians and hooligans and unemployed good-for-nothings. And it wasn't until his own son was kidnapped and the city guards failed to do anything about it that he saw just how much adventurers provided to the city. Just having adventurers in his tavern was its own method of protection. And of course, that can lead to other questions like, what happened to his son? Was he saved? Were there adventurers too late? Why couldn't the city guards do anything about it? Maybe they're corrupt. Who knows? Also, as I already mentioned, every table is going to react to things differently, so there is no guaranteed way, or at least not that I know of, to get your players interested in an NPC. A little gnome working behind a bar that's entirely too tall for him might be all it takes. Or perhaps a half-orc woman? What's a warman? Or perhaps a half-orc woman with some sailor tattoos in an area that has neither a port nor half-orcs. It might just be an out-of-place accent that does the trick. You never can know for sure, but making a character that generally doesn't fit their surroundings can be a good way to garner interest. And that actually brings me to another point that I'd like to make. Making too many NPCs interesting and unique can and will backfire on you. This is an easy trap to fall into when you have a huge universe like Star Wars where there's hundreds of different types of aliens and everyone intermingles with one another. It can get a little overwhelming when everyone in a bar is a different species. It seems cool at first, but if you start thinking about it, it really doesn't make much sense and starts to fall apart. And that's not just Star Wars and science fiction. Fantasy settings can fall into the same trap. And honestly, that might be a fun thing to explore in a different video. Anyway, let's call it quits there because I have definitely rambled on for far too long. I thought this would just be a fun little exercise to go through, so hopefully you enjoyed the ride thus far and got some ideas. Because there's really no big point to be made here. And for shout-outs, I got a couple. First off is this guy I saw the other day looking to pick up some art projects for work, and while this is not an endorsement in any way, he did have some neat-looking stuff. So for those of you looking to get some fancy art done for your own TTRPGs you're working on, you might want to give him a shout. And if he doesn't tickle your fancy, I will also let you know that we have a few artists over in the Squirrel Discord, some of which are actively looking for work, and some that are just talented that maybe you can convince to do some work for you. And last on the list is myself. Avenue Studios is going to be running a game on September 21st at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, and yes, we're going to be using nuts. So if you'd like to come by and see how poorly the system of mine holds together when it's being used, feel free to drop in and say hello. It'll be a grand old time. And that's it. Tell me what your favorite bartender was and what you would do differently. Or what other kinds of bartenders have you made before that was a fan favorite. Squirrel out!